Okay, it's 9:30. I assume everybody is back. We have more of our exciting program now. I would now like to welcome the next presentation, our second presentation of the day, New York City incentives focused on the Con Ed rebate programs. This program will be done by David Chen and Charles Seifert. They are from DVM Industries, and I would like to welcome them now. We have David on the screen, and I would like to welcome them as they load their presentation screen. Thank you, David and Charles, for joining us, and the floor is yours.
Sounds good. Do you guys see my screen?
Yes, we do.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone. My name is David Chen, and today Charles and I will be your host for today. And on behalf of New York City ASHRAE and DVM Industries, we'd like to present to you incentives available for electrification/energy efficiency. So often, like these projects, these capital projects are quite expensive, and most of your clients may not have available funding to sponsor these projects. So we as a DVM Industries, we like to present the incentives available from utilities to really make an impact on your incentives. On your projects. Definitely getting these incentives is the next best thing after winning the Powerball jackpot. So very quickly on DVM Industries, we are a turnkey facilities for energy solutions in the commercial and residential sectors. We basically bring complete cycle of analysis from energy auditing, installation services, maintenance, incentive procurement, and also post-upgrade services. In short, we help the client achieve the best solution with the maximized savings in terms of energy and dollar savings. Here are just some of the quick solutions that we provide, from lightings, motors, heat pumps, one thing's EV charging stations that I did not provide in this slide, rebate, and procurements. So the agenda is the first half, I'm going to go through the Constant's Clean Heat program, and Charles will go through the second part of Constant's core programs for electric and gas incentives. So for my part of the agenda, I'll go in high level about the incentive program, then I'll talk about the type of technology that's incentivized under the program, and one heat pump project example. And Charles will have the same format. So I'll start off. So Constant's Clean Heat program. So this program is it's funded by from the utilities in NYC, and it's a joint effort to promote electrification for heat pumps that's meant for hot water heating and space conditioning for heating and cooling. For the Constant Territory Pacific, it's specific for existing and major renovation facilities for residential, multifamily, and commercial facilities in the New York City and Westchester area. And the program actually resumed as of yesterday. And going very quickly on the incentive structure, as you can see, like there are like different numbers, and each number corresponds to a specific type of category of incentives. And in general, like the key takeaway is the incentive program is meant for space heating and cooling, as well as hot water heating for air source and ground source heat pump. So it's strictly focused on electrification from gas and oil district steam to heat pump heating. So it cannot be like cooling focused. So in this category, you see from 1 to 4, that's space heating. And on the description side, you see like it goes from cold climate air source heat pump, that's what the acronym means, for partial and full load. Then for 3 is for ground source heat pump. And for category 4, these are for like non-prescriptive measures that are outside the requirements for the prescriptive heat pumps. It's meant for custom calculations For example, if you have a very complicated heat pump system that you tie into like a heat recovery and with PV, that could be considered a category 4. Now, what if you bundle your heat pump system with an envelope? And oftentimes, when you bundle with an envelope, such as improving the insulation, better windows, better doors, better roof, the size of your heat pumps can drop down drastically. So that's what category 4A is for. It's to incentivize for the savings of your envelope on top of the heat pumps. 5 through 8 is for water heating. And I'm going to skip 6 for now, but for 5, 7, 8, those are your prescriptive paths for air source, domestic hot water heaters, and ground source. And also number 7 is for the superheater, which is a heat exchanger addition on top of your ground source heat pump. Now, if you have something that's definitely non-residential with a hot water heater that's rated for above 120 gallons, that will be considered a custom incentive. And lastly, if you have a combo of water heating and space heating, you get additional incentives. So next part, I'll go to the type of technology that's incentivized on a very high level. So starting first is mini splits and your VRFs. These are basically, you have indoor and outdoor systems with different varieties of indoor systems. The next thing is rooftop units. These are great replacements if you have existing gas-fired rooftop units, assuming you have enough electrical services for the heat pump units. Next is geothermal. I think that's self-explanatory. And on top of that, recently they added packaged thermal heat pumps to be incentivized. So these are a good replacement if you have PTAC units that run off fossil fuel heating or electric resistance. And next is the fancier ones where you have really large air-to-water heat pumps, which most people call it reversing chillers. These are great retrofits for existing 2- and 4-pipe fan coil systems. And lastly, domestic hot water. Typically, you have a very large condenser that generates domestic hot water. In this case, these particular units that you see here are larger, obviously larger than 120 gallons. So these will be categorized under the category 6 custom incentives. And lastly, I just want to give a very example about how what are the magnitudes and incentives for a project we're currently doing. We have a really big multifamily townhouse in Queens, and the build was in 1950s. The existing HVAC is district hydronic heating and uses oil, and cooling uses conventional window ACs. The number of dwelling units is well over 200, and our proposed system, we kept it very simple, is air source, cold climate air source multi-split systems, where we design one condenser per apartment. A typical apartment is probably 500 to 700 square feet, so we size it to be around 1.5 tons to 2 tons per dwelling unit. So the estimated incentives we acquire is approximately 1.3 mil, which is roughly 40% of the project costs. So that's a pretty nice jackpot for the client. So the results are, in terms of reducing fossil fuel, is we have estimated about 80 gallons a year of number 2 oil will be reduced. And in terms of the local 97 fines for the first cycle, $20,000 will be reduced, and for the next cycle from 2030 to 34, $160,000 will be reduced. So actually, that's a very big jump and makes it place a really important decision for the client, and really definitely helps out with the payback. Very quickly, now Charles will get into the Economist and energy efficiency programs. These programs are obviously different from the clean heat program, which focus more on the core electric and gas programs for Con Ed.
Thanks, David, and thanks everybody for your attention this morning. Close to 250 people in the presentation today, so obviously a very important topic to a lot of people and decision makers in New York City. One of the things that Scott and Paul mentioned earlier in the call was barriers to decarbonization. One of the biggest barriers in achieving this for buildings is the cost. Building owner time horizons have increasingly shortened over the last 20 years. Buildings are bought and sold more often than I think a lot of people realize. And so the time horizons that people expect for payback on their projects is increasingly getting short. And one of the things to help offset that dynamic is in helping outside sources pay for some of these projects. So DVM Industries, as David mentioned, our focus is on helping building owners save, decarbonize through reducing their energy use. And that is basically done through energy retrofits, looking at the different measures of a building and implementing efficiency measures to lower the overall energy use. So one of, we mentioned Con Energy's energy efficiency programs. These are managed throughout the Con Ed grid. At the state level, they're reviewed on a 3-year basis. So this year was a program review year, and they're reviewed throughout the state, and energy efficiency rates and incentives are set on a 3-year rolling basis. So Con Ed's rates for the next 3 years are set for us. The way Con Ed's programs are broken down are 3 large groups: the multifamily energy efficiency program, the commercial and industrial, and then the small to medium business. The multifamily energy efficiency program is for any buildings with 5 or more dwelling units. The commercial and industrial are for any commercial buildings with over 400 kW of demand. And then the small to medium business is basically everything commercial based below that 400 kW. A lot of different measures are incentivized by Con Ed. Some are on a prescriptive basis, others are on a custom basis. But basically anything that you wanted to do as a business owner or building owner in terms of efficiency, whether it's electric, gas, steam, at this point can garner some level of incentive to help offset those payback pictures. And what we wanted to do was go through a couple of examples that DVM has helped their clients achieve. So David, you want to go to the next slide? So this first project to review is for the multifamily efficiency program. This was a large multifamily residential complex in Queens, and across 20 different buildings there are motorized exhausters, these silver mushroom looking things on just about any building in the city, pull air out of the interior of the building, whether that's kitchen, bathroom, common areas, hallways, elevators, and exhaust that into the outdoor environment. Any building over 6 stories is required to have mechanical exhaust, and these systems run 24 hours a day, 7 days a year, unless there's some buildings have implemented a time clock that New York City code allows you to set back the fans on the overnight period, but most buildings don't have those. So what we proposed to the client was to upgrade specifically the motor inside these units to a higher efficient design. It's known as ECM, electronically commutated motors. Across the 20 buildings, there was 20 exhausters per building, so over 400 of these across the whole portfolio. And this wound up saving the client 1.4 million kWh a year. So it was a pretty big reduction in input energy. And the incentives for this program went through the custom path. So we wrote the project and proposed it to the client and pulled in Con Ed, and they were able to offset 50% of the installed cost for getting all these motors changed out, and that resulted in a 1.2-year payback. So you can see, like we mentioned, the barrier to decarbonization, one of those being payback. With a 1.2-year time horizon, I think most clients would say, yes, that's within my ownership time horizon. And by retrofitting these, after 1.2 years, we're going to start saving this money instead of paying it out, as well as, reducing our carbon footprint. So yes, we're going to go ahead and move forward with that project. And that was through the multifamily efficiency project. So Dave, you want to go to the next slide? We mentioned, the 3 programs with Con Ed's, with the breakdown of Con Ed's programs, the other one being commercial and industrial. So this example is for a large data center that we did in the city. They have 3 buildings, over 80 electric motors per building, fractional and integral horsepower types, 1 and 3 phase types. So there's multiple sizes of motors in these systems, multiple applications as well. What we have pictured here is what they call a crack unit, a computer room air conditioning unit. But there's multiple different applications for electric motors under scope for this project. So this was broken down into 3 large areas. One was to help improve the base efficiency of all the motors. So similar to our multifamily project, pulling out the old and inefficient motors and replacing those with higher efficient designs, whether that's in the 1 or 3 phase type. Then going the next step of modulating those new motors according to demand. So adding VFDs where appropriate and coupling those VFDs to some sort of input device that's going to actively modulate that motor. And for the single phase applications, similar dynamic there, modulating those motors whenever possible to take advantage of those affinity law dynamics. And then the third step of efficiency here was adding these measures to a building BMS, where not only can you see what's going on with your system, but if you wanted to override or reduce your usage further, you could do that through the BMS. So adding that level of control is important for these systems. So this particular project across the 3 buildings saved 2.6 million kWh a year. Again, Con Ed brought to the project. This is a custom path application for the commercial and industrial team, and we were able to garner a 50% of installed cost incentive. Very often these incentives are capped, in terms of percent of installed cost. So we did not maximize the incentive for either project, but we were able to meet the client where they wanted to be in terms of their payback pictures. So for this particular client, the 4.5-year toll gate was where they wanted us to be, and we met that. So a good example of, on a commercial industrial basis, some of the largest buildings in the city, saving quite a bit of energy through a retrofit that took on the order of a couple of months to do. Deep building, so it can be invasive, but with the right team and the right preparation, we can do these without a hitch. I think, David, that's it for mine. And at this point, I think if anybody has any questions, we can take those.
Thank you very much. Thank you, David and Charles. We do have some questions. Syed Abidi, for Con Ed incentives, please shed some light on full load and partial load definition of heat pumps.
Sure. Very basically is when you have designed your building heating load calculations, because this program is focused on heating, the program's definition of full load is above 9%, where your heat pump capacity at a specific temperature, design temperature, let's say 17 degrees, meets 9% of the building load. That's considered full load. Anything under 90% is considered partial load, where you need supplemental heating from electric resistance or your existing fossil fuel system to supplement those heating on those really peak cold days.
Now, when you see a movement from one fuel source to another source, does the city have requirements for decommissioning fuel sources that come into play?
From my knowledge, the answer is no, whereas decommissioning, if you're doing electrification, it is not required. For our clients, some of them actually would like to keep their existing systems in case if there's a power outage for the heat pumps. So having that backup just in case something happens during like a really cold day, it's mostly preferred by most of our clients.
That's really interesting to keep the equipment as kind of, let's call it a hybrid, for backup power and or any types of blackouts, brownouts, or any kinds of issues.
Mm-hmm.
I assume floor space and footprint and that becomes into play when you start trying to keep equipment that's being decommissioned. Does the Inflation Reduction Act, has DVM worked with any clients utilizing that funding, whether it's current funding or future funding?
We do get a lot of emails and calls about the Inflation Reduction Act for especially incentivizing these measures that Charles and I presented. And I think heat pumps is one of the specific measures. To be honest, we don't not have any processes with like having like to actually process these rebates of funding, but it's definitely a working issue because this is a constant constant reminder that that clients want to know how can they take that into their consideration when they're making an upgrade for their buildings. So I think many consultants are going to have that as part of their consulting services to be integrated into their overall energy master plan or something of that sort.
Yeah, David, if I could chime in there real quick, Scott, where we see a lot of that factoring into, where we work with clients is in at the state level. We mentioned Con Ed's incentives. They flow from the state, regulatory agency, and how those funds get allocated. But that also happens, from a federal level. So as money comes down through the Inflation Reduction Act, that's going to filter through the state agencies and then down to the local level.
Right. Well, during COVID, when the government pushed out all that CARES Act money, there were a number of customers of our customers that, especially schools and large institutions, that went out and picked up some huge amounts of money in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. And financed their upgrade of their IAQ, their indoor air quality, with those funds. So I just thought that would be, I wouldn't say a bonanza, but surely an opportunity for whether it's the MEP companies or your type of companies to develop that strategy to help lower the overall costs of these upgrades. Which lowers that payback period, which is really what motivates the financial ends of these facilities. Another great question from Brian Neves. Is Con Edison minimum threshold 400 kW or is it 100 kW?
400 kW for the commercial industrial program.
So it's 100 kW.
400.
Do you see most of your work with the Con Ed program on the commercial side or on the residential complex side?
It's shifted, with the last 3 years of, COVID and the change in building use that's driven. We've been doing, and my team has been doing electric motor specific retrofits for close to 10 years now. And we were heavily invested in the commercial building sector, specifically hospitality, because that's where, a large amount of the money was being spent. Then when, quarantine happened and everybody had to stay at home, the commercial building segment and the investment there really dried up overnight. And that drove us to find, offer solutions to the residential building segment. The saving grace for my specific team is electric motors are everywhere people are. We're moving water or air somewhere when people are present. So we saw a large shift in 2020, 2021, and 22 into the residential building segment and the various applications there. We're seeing that swing back. We are seeing more and more of our commercial customers come back around and dust off projects. And then when you look at the tailwind of Local Law 97, and as that time horizon increasingly shortens, the commercial segment is sort of waking back up for us. But as of this point, we're probably about 50-50 in terms of where projects are happening and how incentives are being garnered through the multifamily program or the commercial industrial.
And I want to say for the income side very quickly, I guess Charles 50, I guess for me, like the multifamily versus commercial will probably like 70% multifamily, 30% commercial. For commercial, it'll be the large commercial business because the small businesses, they're not really affected by Local Law 97. So it's really driven by Local Law 97. And for multifamily, especially for like co-ops, multifamily, they're not really like a business, because your tenants, they pay a really high HOA to cover for those Local Law 97 fines. So many of these condo and co-op boards, they reach out to consultants like us, say, is there a path we can do to like reduce our 97 fine before we're paying, 10 times our HOA than what we're paying now. So often heat pump is, from looking at their analysis, heat pump is definitely the biggest impact because 70% of their usage is definitely related to space heating, cooling, and domestic hot water. For commercial, I think it will certainly ramp up soon, especially we're approaching the first cycle of Local Law 97. So I think in future it's definitely be like more 50-50. But for now, we definitely see a multifamily sector being more concerned.
Interesting. So I hear that the penalization of Local Law 97 is motivating customers to surely investigate, research, and in many cases now, hopefully, to implement changes.
Absolutely. Yeah, nothing motivates like a fine, Scott. So even just the threat of a fine, I think is driving the conversation. I think to boil this down a little bit, and I know I'm speaking to a wider group of attendees here, but some of the aspects of Local Law 97 are very esoteric, especially for people at the ground level, rubber meets the road level, who are in charge of running a building and have sinks and toilets to unclog every day. When they're tasked with reducing their building emissions, some of the responses I've gotten have been, well, we don't have any emissions in the building. We don't burn anything. We have electric stoves and we don't have a boiler. And so kind of a swing and a miss there in terms of driving the point home. But what it does is drive the conversation. So we're able to sit in front of clients and kind of explain things a little bit, and then say, okay, once we're on the same level of grounding here, let's look at your building. Let's see, are you subject to any fines in 2024, which is basically on top of us? And if not, let's prepare you for the future. If you are, here's a host of measures that we know as a company and can do turnkey, are scalable in terms of if you're a portfolio owner or operator, we can scale these across your building portfolio, and are of a time horizon financially that's going to be in your interest.
So do you see the things that are being done, are they more from companies like you brought in and then making the recommendation based on what rebates are available? Or is it, maybe it's a combination of the 13 prescribed measures in Local Law 13? Is it a combination of that?
Yeah, and I would speak specific to my team. David and I have different focuses for the company, but specific to the electric motor retrofit that my team executes, it is both. There are prescriptive measures out there that or recommended measures, in the different aspects of the laws and the codes that do drive those conversations. I mentioned the roof exhaust application. Well, that is part of the code. Above six stories, you're required to have mechanical exhaust, and that mechanized exhaust has to run. If you have a roof of exhausters with broken belts and burnt out motors, then you're in violation of that. And so, yes, there are clients that are looking to both fix systems and find a way to offset some of those costs. And it just so happens that the incentive program kind of hits hits both those targets, that they reduce their energy use, they collect an incentive for that, and then also are able to fix some of their issues on the roof. So, so I would say yes to both of those.
Yeah, and for my side, heat pump is more like a, for some people, it's like more like a, do they have like enough money for it? Because is it fairly expensive compared to your conventional, boiler systems? And so that's what a client sees, it's very cost and like driven from the 97 fines and the capital cost. But one thing we try to shed light as a company from our experience working with many building operators and supers is what their staff is capable of. If you come down to a building that's not so well run, and it's probably not the most luxurious apartment in New York City, you cannot recommend a building management system for them because they don't have the staff, the capability to manage it. Even though it's a great system, but that is something that's not viable for them to sustain a long time. You might get fantastic savings with your BMS system for the first year, but if the building operator, or most time it's a super who doesn't have that, like it's the background of a very, very good stationary engineer, that super may not be able to maintain that BMS, and everything will be override and run to its not appropriate sequences. So on top of that, we think what the building facility is capable of doing, and we try to maximize what they can do, and not give them something that they cannot do.
I think that's a very, very important focus for any kind of strategic planning. I think we saw that during COVID and during past upgrades of systems, LEED programs where buildings went platinum or strived to get the rating, but didn't understand the real maintenance, the real not just predictive and preventative maintenance that's required to sustain that rating. It's one thing to have a platinum rating on day one. It's another thing to have a platinum rating in year 4, right? So
right.
I think that's the real challenge here. What kind of paybacks are you seeing for full building decarbonization solutions? That question came from David Goldstein.
Sure. Charles, I'll take a stab at this first. For heat pumps, it varies a lot. Typically, the best payback we see is obviously it starts with the local 97 fines. If they have really big fines, obviously it reduces their payback from like 10 to like 3 years. One key, the second thing is the energy source that they're using for heating. Oil and district steam, those are gonna definitely reduce your payback to like single digits. Unfortunately, gas is still the hardest to compete because in terms of like cost per BT, gas is still much more cost effective, but not so carbon emission friendly. So that's my 2 cents on like terms of payback we see. So it'll definitely be single digits, like 5 to 7 years with the 97 fines, and depending on the fuel source, the existing fuel source type.
So the nice thing that we're seeing here is an integration of, from a building standpoint, what are the areas that you need to impact for decarbonization? Paul had a good dialogue this morning on, what are the goals and what are the use of the building. When you look at a multifamily building, the areas of concern are vastly different than a commercial building. So sticking to the multifamily segment of buildings in the city, you've got your common areas, the hallways, the basements, and the roof, and then you've got the private areas, the residences, be it apartments, condos, or any of the like. And those two areas drive different measures and applications for energy efficiency. David's team does a nice job of addressing the energy use and carbon emissions in the residence with the clean heat program. My team does a good job, and other areas of the company do a good job in addressing the common areas. So the lighting in the hallways and the basements, the electric motors for the exhaust systems, boiler controls, and things like that that address those areas. So when we look at the financial models, they have different different targets and requirements of building owners. The common area applications are nice from a financial standpoint because very often they're 24-hour operation or duty cycle equipment. So lighting is in the hallways is almost always on, roof exhausters are always on. So you can do few measures there and have a pretty good impact in terms of decarbonization. With regard to the payback and the implementation of these things, with the help of the incentives, which several of them, especially the custom path incentives, can be pretty lucrative. We mentioned the multifamily project we did in Queens as a 1.5-year payback there. So the offsets can be pretty good. We're a business and we have targets that our clients require us to meet. There's a very robust and dynamic lighting retrofit market out there. Electric motor retrofit's a little bit more specific, a little bit more specialized in terms of engineering and implementation. But still seeing some good payback targets there. But again, our clients say, if you're not meeting our payback target, we've got other things we can go spend our capital money on. We can go buy more buildings. We can put up some solar. We can retrofit our boiler to some sort of other system. So we have our finger on the pulse of clients pretty good, and we drive our financial models to help meet those targets.
Right. Ramez Afifi asked, are there other sources for incentives in addition to Con Ed? What are other incentives, available sources? What is the general process of pursuing them? Kind of like my Inflation Reduction Act. There's NYSERDA and other New York State facility organizations available.
Sure. At a state level, the Public Utility Regulatory Agency, the PUC, which exists in every state across the country, really stipulates how these programs look and are administered. If you rewind the tape, 5-10 years, there was I would say a conflict or an adversarial relationship between Con Edison or local, New York City-based incentive programs and state-level incentive programs. That's been largely sorted out by the PUC, and they stipulate, at the state level with NYSERDA and their programs, they're going to do specifically different things and incentivize different activity than the local level utilities, be it Orange and Rockland, PSCG, Long Island, Con Ed. All of that is regulated by the PUC. So in terms of where incentives come from for your project, the things that my team does are very often Con Ed specific. There's some offered through the NYSERDA programs, but that's largely been sorted out. David, I can't speak to the heat pump program though.
Yeah, same thing. I think you definitely hit every point I want to say, Charles. Thank you.
Well, you brought up heat pumps, so I'm going to ask a couple of questions on heat pumps. Vesnik Luxa, question regarding PTAC retrofit heat pumps. They have 1,000 of them in their facility. Is the technology proven?
So it depends on just your existing conditions. It sounds really magical. We could just take out an existing PTAC that has electric resistance or hot water, whatever it is that's not heat pump heating, and put in an ice air heat pump PTAC, PTHP in there. But the most important thing, the proven, is these whole kind of PTHPs. It needs internal drainage. You simply can't just just retrofit and do a swap, because most people, I believe, they forget. I probably get $1 for every time I hear this. This is in the wintertime, your PTAC or any heat pump does go through a defrost cycle and creates water. And for New York City, you can't just have that water just leak throughout drain throughout the louver. You need internal drainage. So if your existing system has internal drainage to drain out the condensate for the summertime, you also need that for the winter time. So I don't think it's a proof of concept, the technology. It's just proof if you have the existing infrastructure. And if you don't, something needs to be done to have internal drainage for these units.
Great. Well, we will actually ask that question again on the panel. We have an equipment expert on decarbonization equipment, and we have an expert in design build, contracting and installing. So we're going to bring that question back up to the panel. Another question here is, can you share some of the parameters related to applying and using Con Ed incentives? How can you apply, and does the project need to be done within a specific calendar year or time frame?
Charles, I'm gonna let you go on this one.
Yeah, and just so folks on the presentation understand that, you know, the programs that are offered by Con Ed are split out in specific. So the clean heat program is separate from the multifamily efficiency program, which is separate from the commercial and industrial program. So there are different measures and different requirements for each project. As DVM, we turnkey those for our clients. When we cite a proposal across the table, it includes the incentive filing process. It all starts with the application. So there's a standardized form that Con Ed offers for each different program, be it multifamily or commercial or small to medium business, SMB. You fill that out, and it includes your account number, and you send that in, and then Con Ed basically allocates a slot in their schedule to review your project if it's going to be custom, or to review your application if it's going to be prescriptive. So if you're going to do some LED lighting measure, your scope of work, meaning what lighting are you going to replace, needs to be submitted to Con Ed, and then there's dollar amounts attached to those. So, but it all starts with the application process.
Do drawings need to be part of this application, or is it a general application first? Are there different stages you go through?
Drawings aren't often required by Con Ed. A lot of our clients do like to see those, in terms of as-built or proposed conditions for what work's being done, especially if it includes VFDs and large integral horsepower motors. But no, those typically don't need to be submitted to Con Ed. If you're going custom path, and this is more specific to the commercial and industrial program, there is what needs to be called a project narrative. And there's a rough outline that exists for those, but it basically goes through, here's the project, here's the building, first off, here's the project, second, and then the bulk of that narrative is, here's the hard engineering justification of the electric savings or gas savings or steam savings that we are driving through this project. Meaning, just to take an example, the commercial industrial project I discussed during the presentation, here's measure number one, here's the base case efficiency of the motor that's in there, here's the new motor we're installing with the efficiency that it has, and the delta between those two results in energy savings. That's step one. Step two is, here's the VFD we're going to add to this, and here's how we're going to control the VFD. Here's the daily, weekly, monthly, seasonal load profile that motor is going to run at, and that drives another level of savings. And then adding the BMS and adding the operator control over that system is a third level of savings. But all that needs to be detailed and spelled out for Con Ed to review, and then they come back and say, either we think you're right, you're wrong, or here's your incentive.
Now, is Con Ed getting so many applications right now that they're just inundated?
For the projects that I do, the reason I mentioned the 3-year rolling basis is because, Scott, it does drive that dynamic. With any sort of vagary of the future in terms of incentive programs and dollar amounts that the utility is going to offer, everybody wants to get in under what they know instead of wait for what they don't know. So the tail end of last year for our group was very, very busy. Now that program review has gone through and we're under the new rates, there wasn't a drastic change. Some things went up, some things went down, but I'd say we're back to kind of a normal level of applications at this point. But yeah, the tail end of every 3 years gets very, very busy.
Okay, the reason I asked that was it's connected to that Inflation Reduction Act. I mean, sooner or later that money's there. Sooner or later that money will be gone. And come and get it now. From David Becker Turk, he asked, is Con Ed still accepting new applications for heat pump abatements for commercial industrial buildings? The website says it is out of funds.
As of yesterday, they are.
Okay.
Perfect timing.
So that brings us to the next, to an interesting, what do you do? Out of funds, so there's no rebating, or is that
No,
on hold?
Funding has been reinstated. They have additional funding from Public Service Commission. So, like I said, like the program, it was on pause prior to yesterday, but as of yesterday, it's been relaunched, and now there's.
Go ahead.
Oh, and just like obviously some of the requirements for the application they'll be different. There's probably more incentive caps on your projects, but public service, Con Ed, New York State, they do know this program is very important for us to meet our electrification goals for 97 and 20. So funding, it was very important to get that funding back as soon as possible. It take a while, but like it's definitely
the idea that the facilities that wanna upgrade, that feel they're going to upgrade because of their strategic planning, that they should get going, right?
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely a competition for funding, so definitely get going and work with a consultant if you need to start planning. And just like what Charles said, you have to plan and see like what are your requirements. You have a certain payback that works for you, and really just get started on that as soon as possible. And you rather like you rather like get your foot in the door before it's too late.
Absolutely. The previous question about how to apply for the incentives and timeframes, that was by Heidi Swanson. I want to just take a quick moment. The QR code for Charles and David's presentation is up on the screen. I will be putting in, if you can't do the QR code, I will be putting in the URL in the panel discussions for you to click in. It's important to know that you have to apply with the PDH credit form each time for the presentation. For Paul Torricelli's presentation, for this presentation, and then for the panel presentation individually. So you do that three times. Won't take a long time. So please do that. One more question from Olivia Boré. Are there any energy performance M&V requirements to track savings for projects funded by rebates or incentives for commercial clients or large-scale projects?
Interesting question. A lot of the projects that we have done when we first did them, and this is specific to electric motor retrofits, did require M&V, a measurement and verification process by Con Ed. Unfortunately, until we had, I would say, the tailwind of Local Law 97 and driving the larger conversation around decarbonization, a lot of energy efficiency technologies were left by the wayside or left to new construction, and meeting LEED requirements and those kind of conversations. When we looked at existing buildings, there really wasn't much driving new technology implementation there. And because of that dynamic, measurement and verification was required by Con Ed. For the large part of the projects that we do now, both in multifamily and commercial buildings, we've passed that toll gate. The technology has been established, and the engineering teams are familiar enough with the technology that they don't have to go through the M&V. Occasionally, we run across a new measure or a new application or new technology that requires that, but by and large, at this point, with our turnkey process, we no longer have to do that. And Scott, if I could just go back just briefly and add to David's conversation, with regard to applying for incentives. One thing that is required to garner an incentive for a project is your building or your account, your Con Ed account has to pay into the SBC, the Systems Benefit Charge. You will see that on your bill. Con Ed can also tell you that once you apply for it and fill out the application. They'll tell you whether you qualify for one or not. And the reason I bring that up is, essentially, we are all paying for these measures, and building owners and operators, when they apply for an incentive, they're essentially just getting their money back. And that's often the dialogue that we have with clients is, yes, incentives are good to have and they offset, the financial analysis of your project, but you are kind of, closing the loop on that incentive dynamic when you file and take one for your project.
That's great. We have just one more question from Alexander Fratzen. This is the second question. We love audience questions. They're what fuel the debate. Do you know whether building owners can rely on carbon offset certificates to mitigate local law 97 excess carbon emissions tax penalties, or is this subject to final regulatory drafts from DOB? Because it's mentioned in local law 97 about offsets and renewable power on site.
Mm-hmm. I'm not aware of the dynamic that carbon offsets would create specific to local law 97. They don't factor into the analysis of our projects today. Very well may in the future, but specific to our projects, they are focused on electric savings through the incentive programs at the local level.
Fantastic. Yep. All right, thanks, gentlemen. We want to keep on schedule. So we're going to thank you once again for your time and for your effort here. Appreciate that. For the audience, David will be sitting on the panel. So any further questions, we have a couple that just came in. So we will answer those on the panel. Once again, PDH QR code for the PDH credit is on the screen and the URL in the chat. We're going to take a 5, 6, we're going to take a 7-minute break right now. It is 10:23. Therefore, we will all come back at 10:30 and we will start the decarbonization panel. So thank you very much, and we'll see everyone promptly at 10:30.